Russia is at it again. Its fighter jets just can't seem to stay out of airspace where they don't belong, especially in the Baltic region. Time and time again, those jets fly without any prior warning, violating other countries' airspace while on secret missions to do who knows what on their country's behalf. But this time, Russia's jets were face down. A pair of Italian F-35s has intercepted a Russian Su-24 and Su-27 in NATO alliance airspace. What happens next is the question on everybody's lips. On August 13, United 24 media reported that a pair of Italian F-35s had scrambled into action to intercept two Russian fighter jets flying in airspace where they shouldn't have been. The jets didn't take off from Italy. Instead, they came from the Amari air base in Estonia, from which they went to meet the Russian jets that were encroaching on Baltic airspace. The mission was conducted as part of NATO's Air Policing Mission, which will be discussed in more detail later in the video. According to Army recognition, the deployment of Italy's F-35s marks the first time that they've been flown in the Baltic theatre, and it follows on from a few days prior when Hungarian Gripen jets were forced to take to the skies to confront a Russian threat. Two such incidents in a matter of days tells us that Russia is getting brave, or perhaps foolhardier, with its attempts to intimidate the Baltic states and NATO as a whole. This is an escalation. Russia is conducting aerial maneuvers to poke and prod at NATO's forces, and NATO's response fit the crime. Now, if that suggests the Russian jets were shot out of the skies, well, that's not the case here. NATO is much smarter than that. It's not going to potentially start a war with Russia over jets encroaching on alliance airspace. But by the same token, it can't allow Russia to get away with such flagrant violations of international law. As Army recognition points out, the Russian jets were operating without transponders or flight plans. Both are deliberate omissions. The lack of flight plans ensures that nobody will ever know precisely what the jets were up to if either of them happens to crash land or be taken by another country. As for the missing transponders, these electronic devices allow air traffic controllers to detect and track any plane that enters their airspace. It's pretty clear why the Russian jets didn't have transponders. They wanted to fly under the radar, and they failed. The Italian F-35s that went to intercept the Russian jets are part of the Estonian Amari base's Quick Reaction Alert, or QRA posture, Army recognition notes. According to Forces News, a QRA is a state of readiness and modus operandi of air defense maintained at all times by NATO allies. NATO jets, operating under a QRA, have crews that are on standby 24 hours a day, ready to take off at a moment's notice to serve as the first line of defense against an incoming threat. That could easily mean that these jets engage targets that are actively trying to cause harm on NATO territory. That's not what ended up happening on August 13. Instead, the Italian F-35s took to the skies and flew within interception range of Russia's fighter jets. Knowing that they'd been rumbled, the Russian pilots did what they always do in these situations. They fled back to Russian airspace. Unfortunately, it's unknown how long Russia's jets were flying around Estonia, or what they might have managed to learn before the F-35s reached them. But the obvious question remains. What would have happened if Italy's F-35s did more than intercept the Russian jets? It would have been bad news for Russia if the F-35 specifications are anything to go by. Made in the United States, the F-35 is a fifth-generation aerial platform that was designed to replace America's F-16s and A-10 Thunderbolts, says the US Air Force website. It's fast, stealthy, and has been designed with enhanced survivability in mind while serving as a multi-role fighter. An F-35's engines can generate 43,000 pounds of thrust, allowing the jet to reach a top speed of Mach 1.6. Range isn't a problem either, as F-35s can fly for more than 1,350 miles before needing to refuel. If aerial tankers are deployed across their intended route, these jets can even stay in the air indefinitely, or at least as long as the tankers have fuel to deliver to them. F-35s have a flight ceiling of 50,000 feet and can be loaded with an array of munitions depending on the mission they need to carry out. Among those weapons is an M61A2 Vulcan cannon, which is a 6-barreled 20mm rotary gun that can rattle off 6,000 rounds per minute, though the typical jet is only equipped with 180 rounds. If the cannon won't do, an F-35 can also carry an array of missiles, including AIM-120 AMRAAMs, AIM-9X Sidewinders, and GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack munitions. The latter are ideal for dealing with ground targets, as JDAMs are essentially wing kits installed onto dumb bombs that allow them to deliver devastating explosive force to a target. The AMRAAMs and Sidewinders would be far more suited to taking out other jets in air-to-air combat. And speaking of other jets, neither of the two that Russia sent into NATO airspace on August 13 compares to the F-35. The Su-24 Fencer Sukhoi is a frontline attack and interdictor jet that entered service in 1975. That makes it a Soviet-era jet, though it's possible that Russia's pilot was flying a Su-24M, which is an upgraded version of the aircraft that entered service in 1983. Either way, the Su-24 is far older than the F-35, as demonstrated by its being classified as a fourth-generation fighter. For a fourth-generation jet, the Su-24 has half-decent specifications. It can hit a top speed of Mach 1. That's quick, but it's 0.6 Mach behind the F-35, meaning the Su-24 isn't escaping in a dogfight. The jet's range of 652 miles also doesn't stack up favorably to the F-35. If they wanted, an F-35 pilot could just chase a Su-24 down, stay out of range of its weapons, and force it to deplete its fuel so it has to fly out of a combat zone. As for weapons, the Su-24 can carry nukes, which aren't much use in a direct fight with an F-35, along with Vimpel R-60 IR homing air-to-air missiles and Kh-23 guided missiles. A decent loadout, but it doesn't matter much when the Su-24 is dealing with a fighter jet that's faster, stronger, and knows exactly where it is. The Su-27 doesn't fare much better. Another fourth-generation jet, the Su-27 entered service in 1984 and at the time was a trailblazer. Army recognition says the jet achieved over 40 world records related to its takeoff speed and altitude. However, those records were set decades ago. Having said that, the jet can hit Mach 2, which is faster than an F-35 and has a higher range at 2,193 miles. Its 30mm cannon is also solid competition for the F-35's 20mm gun. Plus, being loaded out with Vimpel R-73 and Vimpel R-27 air-to-air missiles makes the jet a much more dangerous aerial prospect than the Su-24. If either of Russia's jets were going to put up a fight against the F-35, it's the Su-27. Key Aero even says that the jet is maneuverable enough to make it decent competition for some fifth-generation fighters. All of this would make it seem that the jet can match up quite well to the F-35. It can't. As the national interest highlighted in a February 2024 article, the Su-27 isn't a match for the F-35, even with its impressive on-paper specifications. Aero Corner adds to this, noting that the F-35's stealth capabilities give it a distinct edge over the Su-27. Sure, the Russian jet may be faster and have a better range, but the F-35's low-profile body and materials that can absorb radar signals mean it could sneak up on the Russian jet in a true aerial engagement. That didn't happen on August 13 because NATO wanted to show Russia that it could see exactly what its jets were doing. If this were a real dogfight, it wouldn't even be a dogfight at all. The F-35 would have approached undetected, and neither the Su-24 nor Su-27 would have known about it until missiles were flying in their directions. Perhaps Army recognition puts it best in its report on the Russian jet incident. The Italian F-35 Lightning II offers a generational leap in capability. Its stealth profile, advanced radar and electro-optical sensors, and network data sharing capacity allow it to detect, classify, and track multiple threats well before being detected in return. That generational leap is the difference maker. Russia's jets were good for their era. The F-35 is great for today's era. That's why they're serving as a key part of the NATO Air Policing Mission mentioned earlier in the video. The UK Defence Journal notes that NATO made this clear when delivering a statement on the Russian jet interception. According to the journal, that statement saw NATO discuss how the Air Policing Mission is designed to protect alliance airspace and act as reassurance to those members of NATO that don't have fighter jets of their own, such as Estonia. What went down on August 13 was the mission's ability to rapidly respond to a potential threat, the statement goes on to claim, with the UK Defence Journal noting that the air policing mission is purely defensive, which is another reason why missiles weren't flying toward Russia's jets. NATO itself provides a few more details, noting that the air policing mission isn't a new concept. It was created in 1961 at the height of the Cold War to serve as a defense and deterrence measure. That goal hasn't changed, as seen on August 13. NATO also outlines the mission's duties, which extend beyond confronting Russian fighter jets that are breaking international law. Safeguarding the integrity of airspace is a permanent peacetime task contributing to NATO's collective defense, NATO says. It is a clear sign of cohesion, shared responsibility, and solidarity across the alliance. Moreover, NATO air policing forces also provide support to civilian aircraft in distress when they've lost communication with air traffic control, for example. In other words, 2 Italian F-35s scrambling to meet a Russian Su-24 and Su-27 are exactly what the air policing mission is designed to do. And when it's not doing that, civilian aircraft can benefit from the mission's ability to quickly respond to issues identified in the skies. That's all well and good. But the real question that has to be asked now is what Russia's jets entering NATO airspace actually means. The Economic Times asked a question that seems a little far-fetched. World War III beginning, its headline blared in its report on the incident. The article offers no real reasoning for why this most recent incident is a sign of a new global war, which means it's fair to say, no, World War III isn't beginning. Sort of. While the Economic Times may have gone down the shock and awe route with its headline, it may not be as far off the mark as it first appears. Yes, World War III isn't beginning in the sense that Russian fighter jets are dropping bombs over the Baltic, and NATO jets are responding by shooting them out of the skies. However, the words World War III aren't as out of place as they appear. One prominent Russian certainly seems to think that the world is on the brink. On July 28, Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs published remarks made by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov during an appearance at the 11th Terra Scientia National Educational Youth Forum. Most of these remarks saw Lavrov discuss war, with a key quote being as follows. Many political scientists, academics, and experts seriously argue that a third world war is not just unavoidable, but is already underway in new forms, beginning with the West's aggression against Yugoslavia in 1999, followed by aggression against Iraq, the destruction of Libya, and the attack on Syria. All these Middle Eastern countries are now in a state of turmoil. Of course, there's a healthy dose of Russia playing the West blaming game with these remarks, but the very fact that Lavrov brings up the concept of World War III at all suggests that the thinking in Russia is that such a war is brewing, if it hasn't already started. The bombs aren't flying between Russia and NATO yet. However, Russia sending its jets into NATO airspace is a clear attempt to test the NATO response and gather information. What for? A future war perhaps? It's not known for certain. The Week also makes some interesting points in a July article, in which it points out that there's already plenty of fighting around the globe that could suggest World War III is underway. After all, Russia and NATO aren't the entire world. In the Middle East, Israel is battling against Iran and various Islamic terrorist sects. The US has gotten involved in that conflict with airstrikes against the Houthis in Yemen and an attack on Iran that saw it try to destroy the country's nuclear bases. Iran responded with a strike against a US airbase in Qatar. China is embroiled in a trade war with the US, the Week adds. Plus, it says that many observers believe that China is gearing up to invade Taiwan by 2027, which would almost inevitably draw the US and other Western allies into a conflict. North Korea is sending soldiers to Russia to fight in Ukraine. The collective West is sending weapons and military aid so the country can defend itself against Russia and launch strikes on Russian territory. And now, Russia's fighter jets are starting to encroach on NATO airspace. Perhaps talk of World War III isn't so hyperbolic. A lot of countries are fighting right now, and the world seems to be collectively sitting on a powder keg that's just waiting to explode. A pair of Russian fighter jets being intercepted by Italian F-35s isn't the spark that will light the fuse of that powder keg, but it's also yet another example of the high tensions that exist in Europe, especially in the Baltic region. That's the region to zero in order to get to the bottom of what Russian jets in Baltic airspace really means. Frankly, August 13 is far from the first time this has happened. Already touched on were the scrambling of Hungarian jets to deal with a similar incident just a couple of days before Italy's F-35s took to the skies. And back in April, the Defence Post reported that a pair of UK Royal Air Force Typhoons carried out a similar interception mission over the Baltic Sea. They were forced to intercept Russian jets 3 times in 2 days, including a pair of Su-30 MKIs and an IL-20M spying and surveillance aircraft. Fast forward to June 28, and the Kyiv Independent reported that Germany scrambled its fighter jets again over the Baltic Sea to once again intercept a Russian IL-20M. These aren't isolated incidents. There's a clear pattern here, both in terms of what Russia is doing and where it's doing it. The Baltic region is a target for Russia, and those who live in the Baltic states of Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia know it. All 3 are former Soviet states, which doesn't bode well given that part of Putin's justification for the Ukraine invasion seems to rest on Ukraine historically being part of Russia. In March 2025, the BBC reported that the Baltic states are all trying to Putin-proof themselves amidst fears that any one of them could be next if Russia is victorious in Ukraine. NATO's Air Policing Mission is part of this. So is Estonia's decision to equip its side of the bridge that separates it from Russia with Dragon's Teeth, which are anti-tank defences that serve as a clear indicator that the country believes Russia may soon come rolling through. Even going back to the beginning of the Ukraine war, there are warning signs from the Baltic states that they believe they're next on Putin's agenda. In July 2022, LSM reported that almost 30% of Latvian civilians who count Latvian as their primary language believe that Putin will try to conquer the Baltic states next. This isn't just panic from within those states. In July, NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte warned that Russia might attempt to attack Estonia within the next 5 to 7 years if NATO fails to increase collective defense spending and develop the sort of force readiness needed to stop Russia in its tracks. If that invasion happened, it would trigger Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which duty binds all members to come to the aid of any other member that is attacked on its own territory. As Rutte told the New York Times in July,
"We have all the plans in place that if Estonia will be attacked and the Russians know this, that our reaction will be devastating."
If that's not fighting talk, what is? Again, it's important to point out that 2 Russian jets flying into Baltic airspace isn't an attack. If anything, it's becoming a common occurrence. That's an obvious concern. What appears to be happening is Putin testing NATO as he attempts to gather information about the region that many believe he'll target after Ukraine. Russia's leader likely expected NATO to intercept his Su-24 and Su-27, even if he didn't expect Italian F-35s to be the aircraft to do it. That won't stop him. There are bound to be more Russian jets flying illegally over the Baltic region, just as there were before the August 13 incident took place. It's performative testing. A Russian leader thumbing his nose at NATO while attempting to intimidate the Baltic states that he knows have no real air force beyond the air policing mission provided by NATO to protect them. When taken as an isolated incident, F-35s intercepting Russian fighter jets in NATO airspace is a provocation, but not a major incident. But when considered as part of a much wider campaign of airspace incursions and World War III rhetoric, maybe the Economic Times isn't as far off the mark with its inflammatory headline as it appears. World War III may indeed be coming. Some might even argue that it's already happening, and it's only a matter of time before the Baltic states are direct combatants. But maybe Putin won't ever get the chance to expand his Ukraine war into NATO borders. The Russian leader's grip on power is facing the biggest threat it's faced in decades. Moscow coup whispers explode, and Putin is about to be betrayed. Discover what's happening in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in the conflict between NATO and Russia.